last chapter of Peter Pan. Half chapter today, and we'll finish the book tomorrow. Chapter 17, Growing Up and Goodbyes. The next morning, Mrs. Darling walked into her children's bedroom, and there they were, her babies, sound asleep as though they had never left. For a moment she thought she must have imagined them leaving in the first place. If it were not for Mr. Darling asleep in his kennel, she wouldn't have been sure. Of course, the children were only pretending to sleep. Unable to stand the suspense any longer, they leaped up from their beds, screaming, and ran and hugged and kissed their mother. At the commotion, Mr. Darling crawled sleepily out of his kennel. Nana came running into the room as well. Outside, watching the Darling family reunion from a nearby tree, a little boy named Peter Pan shed a tear. He would never know such happiness, he thought. Here's Mr. Darling asleep in the kennel. The other Lost Boys were a different story. Wendy had hidden them downstairs, but she summoned them now. She made them stand in a row in front of her mother. She wished they were not all still wearing their pirate clothes. Please take us in, the little pirates begged. We don't eat a lot, Nibs said. Of course we will have you, Mrs. Darling said at once. But Mr. Darling frowned. It's an awful lot of boys, he said. Really, just wish Mrs. Darling had not answered without asking him. I just wish people wouldn't treat me like a nobody in my own house, he explained. We don't think you're a nobody, Toodles cried, and the others all agreed. You are everything to me, Mrs. Darling whispered to him. Happy, Mr. Darling said he supposed they could make room, somehow. As for Peter, he was still outside, lingering. Wendy saw him and walked over to the window. Oh, hello, he said casually, as if running into Wendy was a mere coincidence. Peter, Wendy said, please come inside. My parents will adopt you too. Mrs. Darling came over and stood behind her daughter. It's true, she said. You would send me to school and expect me to grow up, Peter accused her. Deny it. But Mrs. Darling couldn't. I knew it, Peter cried. Keep back, madam. No one is going to catch me and make me be a man. I'm going back to Neverland. But I'll miss you so much, Wendy said. I brought back the boys. Perhaps that's enough. Maybe I should go back with you. Wendy turned to look at her mother. Oh no, Mrs. Darling said quickly. But he needs a mother. So do you, sweetheart. Mrs. Darling could see that her decision pained Wendy and Peter, and so she agreed that Wendy could return to Neverland for 1 week a year to help Peter with spring cleaning. Peter was happy with this. He had no sense of time anyway. He begged Wendy goodbye and said that he would be back in the spring. The boys went to school. They learned many things, but eventually they forgot how to fly. They said it was because they were not practicing, but in truth it seemed they no longer believed. And besides, no longer had fairy dust to help them. Michael held on to his belief far longer than the others, and Peter did come back as he promised, at the first sign of spring. Wendy had grown up since he had seen her last, and she worried he would notice. He didn't, as usual. He thought and talked mainly about himself. She had been looking forward to reliving her old adventures, but Peter had so many new ones since theirs, he didn't even remember them. Who's Captain Hook, he asked. You don't remember saving all of our lives? I forgot them when they're gone, Peter replied. The next spring, Wendy waited, but Peter never came. Maybe he's sick, Michael said. Maybe we just imagined him. Wendy cried at that. Could it be? But the following year, Peter came as planned. He didn't even seem to realize he had missed a year. And that was the last time a girl named Wendy ever saw a boy named Peter Pan. Part 2 of the last chapter tomorrow.